I definitely wish I had figured out where AI was going a lot sooner than I did, which was basically when the engineers told me. Other than that, I think I wish that I had known how much I'd still love the industry that I'm in. I think I spent a lot of time questioning that just based on the life stage I was at. And I think
Hmm.
I would have been so excited to know I still love it as much as I do and that I would still be as fulfilled by it.
Does that mean you had a period in your career, sort of 10 years ago, where you were thinking, is the grass greener the other side of this hill? Should I go and try something different? Is that where you were? Were you thinking, maybe I should move out of this world?
No, I think it's just a generational thing of like, the upcoming generation. Like, I read all the information that says, and, talk to people and they're like, you're going to have so many different careers. Like, we're different from our parents' generation. You're going to have so many different careers. And I kept thinking, like, wow, I wonder what my next career is going to be. And here I am nearly 30 years into this. And I'm like, no, it's still fascinating. And it's still, partly is because this industry changes so fast. So I think that's part of the reason that I still love it. I love technology. I'm a bit of a data geek. All those things. I love marketing and advertising. So I think that's the thing that, and I don't know that I would have done anything different, but I think I would have found a lot of comfort and not been kind of looking around, going, "Wait a minute, should I be having another career?" And the reality, I could just sat back and been like, "No, this one's still going to be super fascinating and interesting."
I have a belief that careers advice is probably an industry that needs disrupting. I hate disruption as a word, but careers advice is just generally terrible from whether you're at school or things that people write in sort of op-eds about changing career and second careers. Everything's just always awful, isn't it? And then he's probably spent years going, should I be doing something else? Like, no, I'm right where I need to be.
You know what? Like, I always struggle with this one because I've never had a career plan ever. I mean, if you like, it literally, like, I've sat in so many, not so many, but every job interview I think I've ever had, they said 5 years from now, where do you want to be? And I finally started answering honestly about 15 years ago, where I was like, I have no idea. If you can tell me where this industry is going to be in 15 years, great. I will give you an indicator of where I think I want to go. But the reality is, if I knew where the industry was going to go in 5 years, I would just be sitting on a beach counting my money and advising people like Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar and everybody else and just saying, like, hey, here's where I think it's going to go. But I don't know that. And what I do know is it has changed so much and I absolutely love it. So I just I don't look too far ahead because I'm like, I genuinely don't know where it's going to go. I'm not that smart.
Hey up and welcome to the strategy sessions. My name is Andy Jarvis and thank you for joining me on the show today. I'm joined today by fantastic guest. It's Suzanne Claassen. Suzanne is the managing director for Google's Central Eastern Europe ad division, working with agencies from their Dublin office around that whole region. And we talk about AI, we talk about customer centricity, we talk about, funnily enough, talking to your customers. An amazing stat. Suzanne talks to about 100 customers a year. Mind blown by that. Absolutely mind blown by it. Just proved to me, in a company as big as Google, the decision to talk to customers is just that. It's a decision. You either choose to do it or you don't. Oh, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough this. I don't have enough that. You choose to make time for it or you choose not to. It's 100% a decision. So we absolutely loved talking about that. And I loved unpacking that a little bit. This is the last episode of 2024. I'll be back next year. I've already got a couple recorded for January, February. Same thing. Going to carry on in the same vein. But until then, thank you for joining me this year. If you're new to the show, it's been wonderful to have some new listeners come along. If you're a long-time listener, thank you. I really appreciate that too. Have a listen to this episode with Suzanne. Have a great Christmas. If you are one of the few who has to work between Christmas and New Year, dig into the back catalogue. A few people in the office, you can have my voice in surround sound bouncing around the office and the speakers in the room while you're there on your own. I'll keep you company this Christmas. Or maybe just put some Christmas music on. You're probably better doing it. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you for coming along. Have a listen to this episode. Suzanne, thank you very much for that lovely intro. And let's dive into it a little bit more. So we'll talk initially about your career. So let's start by explaining to everybody what you do right now. And then we can kind of maybe go back to some of the things you said in your first answer.
Okay. Well, right now I lead a sales team for Google. I have a team of about 110 people. We call on 23 markets in Central and Eastern Europe. The biggest ones would be Ukraine, Czechia, Greece, and then there's a slew of other markets that we call on.
Excellent. And you've been in Google for how many years now in the sort of the tech space?
I've been in the tech space. I started exclusively focusing on digital marketing in 1999. And then I joined Google about 12 years ago. I spent the first 16 years of my career in agencies.
Yeah. So Seth Godin was, I love to name drop, sorry. Seth Godin was on the podcast a little while ago, and he mentioned, oh, I invented email marketing, but was just a great line that will always stay with me. But so he was like, oh yeah, I invented digital email marketing back in something, and Yahoo didn't want to, and anyway, it was a great thing to listen to. But 1999, you started focusing on digital marketing. 2024, I had to think what year it is. You're still in the digital marketing world.
Mm-hmm.
How does it look compared to how it looked in 1999? I mean, there's lots changed. So talk us through if there's anything that's still the same, and talk us through maybe any surprises that are different for you.
So I think a lot looks the same. I think that's, if I think about what we spoke to our customers about back then, so remember I was agency side. So at that point, we were trying to convince customers to invest in digital marketing. And I think a lot of what we were saying was the same. Like there is a closer connection, a more personalized connection. So we used to say things about like, the things you do on your computer are not necessarily things you would show anybody. And it's the same stuff we talk about mobile phones now. It's the same thing that we know AI is going to pick up on. And when we get to customizable, like it's indisputable, your behaviors speak. And so I think that personalization, customization, that's certainly still there. I think from a marketing perspective, the courage to be bold and innovative, like the need for that, for you to actually connect with people in a new, meaningful way is similar. I think the accountability of it, that's something we talked about a lot, is like digital marketing. I can remember because I started my career in, print and out of home and television. And we would say the accountability of it, like now you know exactly what's happening. And I do think, we don't know, we all know, but at this point, we don't know exactly what's happening. But the accountability of digital is certainly significantly higher than other forms of marketing. So I think I think people would be surprised at how much is still the same 25 years later. I think some of the innovation, certainly like if I had painted the picture of mobile primary, devices being mobile and the amount of our lives we live on them, I definitely would not have understood that, the potential for that. AI, of course, like everybody knows, I'm sure you've talked about it with everybody, but that does change everything again. Like it is the next iteration that for me keeps me super interested in it. So that is quite new. I think some of the ways in general marketing is starting to change is I think the innovation and the access that people have to content and information and maybe the way that they now that AI is creating more access to creation tools, so the amount of content out there, I think some of the things that they're going to change are, I think the value of content is going to change from the amount of it and things like that to the trustworthiness of it. I also think I heard a really interesting idea the other day at an event where a really intelligent gentleman was talking about that the onus of brand loyalty has switched. And now it used to be on consumers to be loyal to a brand. But in today's age of access to goods and access to introduction of goods in a very targeted, personalized way, brand loyalty 100% switches to brands now. So even somebody who's bought your brand, for 15, 20 years, it's now on you to intercept them and get them to renew. You have to constantly, can't ever be in maintenance mode. You have to constantly be in renew mode, renew their love of the brand. And I thought that was fascinating.
The episode which came out, I think just before this, one, maybe two before this episode comes out, was with Aaron Ahuvia, who is known as the Love Doctor. And not as seedy as it sounds. He spent his whole career researching why people love things, mostly focused on brands and things like that. And he made a point that one of the
the biggest advocates for a brand are people who just moved out of the category for some reason or other. Not that they fell out of love with your product. So something like in the easy option to think about is in maternity, where baby products come along and mum and dad both love a certain product, but you just don't need it after a year or after 2 years, something like that. So, but the biggest fans for brands who recommend them to everyone are people who leave a brand like that and they stay loyal to it forever because they never fall out of love with the brand. They just move on from it for life reasons. And they'll still talk about maybe their favorite car or they'll talk about their favorite brands at certain points in time. They've just outgrown it or whatever. Oh, I still love that Mini. I can't drive a Mini anymore. I need to drive an SUV. But they'll tell everyone how great the Mini was forever. But the rest of the sort of brand loyalty concept, he said, is actually really a double-edged sword. If you go for that and you want people to love your brand, you have to accept that you can really switch people off to that as well. And once they go, getting them back can be really, really difficult.
I think if I think about the first part of that, it's super interesting. So I'll use that exact example. If I think about my children are 14 and 8 years old. If I think about the brands, I definitely have amazing memories and would say like, oh, I loved that, I loved that buggy or that car seat or whatever, right? I guarantee you, if I were in the market right now, like if I, had another baby right now, I wouldn't run back to those brands because I'd go, so there's so much out there. Like there's so much I don't know about, like my kids are quite far apart. So it even happened with that 6 years where I was like, whoa, everything changed. So it's a fascinating one to think about. And I think it's in terms of like, I would look at a more long-term, like I'll give another example of, I really try to limit my purchasing to sustainable brands and goods. And so there's a shoe brand I love. I'm quite loyal to them. I would have considered myself quite loyal. I got intercepted on Instagram with another brand, sustainable shoes, very similar aesthetics and styles that I would like, and about half the price. And so guess what I did? I bought a couple pairs to see like, hey, I wonder if I'm going to like them as much. And I do. So I still love that other brand, but when I have to shop, I'm going to first go to the second brand. And so my loyalty, like it's an interesting one. And I think about, and I was thinking long and hard about it. And that first brand, they were not intercepting me. So they were sending me emails, but they were not intercepting me on where I'm spending my time daily. So when I'm strolling through Instagram to see what my friends and family are up to, this other brand was very present and they got me when I needed some new shoes. I gave him a shot. So it really made me think about what he was saying. So I think I love that concept of what you were sharing there about your other guest, but I think it's an interesting one to think about. Like there's the mindset, but then there's also the actual behavior. And I think that can be changed quite significantly.
Yeah. And I think you're right in terms of that, the way people behave now and the way they spend their time. And going back to what you said about brands have to work so much harder now to build loyalty. And I almost think loyalty is the wrong word we should use because I'm not sure people are overly loyal. Like you say, you love that brand. They never did anything wrong, but you moved on to another brand. I think repeat purchase is probably the language we should use rather than loyalty. But even though they might know the repeat purchase window on someone with those type of shoes is every 6 months or every 9 months, they probably have in their marketing plan, so we need to show up after 7 months because we know you're going to repeat purchase at 9 or whatever. But they didn't. Someone else jumped in at 3 months, 4 months, 5 months and just turned your head. So it's a really difficult world and you've got to be always on, really, haven't you? As a marketer now, you've got to be using the channels to keep pushing your message.
Yeah, that's exactly it because it's so targeted now. And with the creation of AI creative, right? And these tools that are accessible, that personalization. So the timing, we can get so intricate with the timing at all points of the funnel. We can get so intricate with the message. So it's personalized. So I think it doesn't like, I think the fear that I have is people think that translates to, I've got to spend, 4x what I normally would spend in marketing. But I actually don't think so. I think we can get so much more insight on behaviors and so much more insight on the right message that it truly is more impactful. And that's the thing, like when I go back to my love of this, that's what I love is, back I started this in 1997. So I'm coming up on, 28 years.
A few years.
Yeah, I know. Like, oh goodness. So 28 years. And we talked about reach and frequency then. And I think that's the wrong metric now, right? Now it's about that targeted, impactful interaction. That's why that I'm saying, like, and AI changes that, our ability to do that. But again, from the messaging as well as the placement. And that's why I still stay in love with this industry, is because I think not just the ways we do it, but how we should do it, how we measure, how we think about meaningful interaction. Like going back to that idea of loyalty, I'm with you. It's not that, it's like that renew. And that's what I think, like, you can break it down to like metrics. You would get down to purchase behavior and purchase regularity and frequency and all that, and basket size and all those things. But it's truly like, if you think about what you have to do, you have to get people to constantly renew their love with your brand. Like, do they love, are they eager that the next time they buy, that they're like, man, I've been seeing this stuff, it's perfect for me, I can't wait till I need a new pair of shoes, I'm going to go right there.
Yeah. There is an interesting concept there of waiting until you need a new pair of shoes. My wife would tell you that that is not a gene I have. We've now had to have a blanket ban of 1 in, 1 out, because I think I own probably close to about 50 pairs of sneakers.
Wow,
Look,
that's
it
some
was either
commitment.
that, golf, cycling, a sports car, or an affair. So the trainers' running shoes just seemed like the least hassle, and
It's the
that's just
definitely
the
the
way I've gone.
healthiest of
Definitely the
those
healthiest.
options. It's going to be the healthiest for your family, like for your family, like
And
golf.
for me as well, I get a
Golf takes
lot
a
of love
lot of
out of it.
time.
So a lot of
Yeah,
love
there
out
you
of it.
go.
So
I mean,
there you go.
we all have our vices and our indulgences. It's okay. I'm drinking bubble
That's
tea. That's one of my indulgences.
something I've not tried yet. So we'll maybe come to bubble tea soon, because I think there's an interesting thing about why people try things. But we'll move on from that. So there's a couple of things you mentioned while you were talking that really speak to my heart, and I want to get into how you do it, because you've got a big team and you operate across a huge patch, languages, cultures, all sorts of stuff going on. You mentioned about when you talk to your customers, and
Mm.
this is, anyone who listens regularly to the podcast will be rolling their eyes right now and going, oh no, not Jarvis talking about talking to your customers again. But it's so essential in what you do, in being able to hear the voice of the customer. So one thing I've noticed is, we've talked about how kind of omnipresent digital is, how you can get to all channels to reach people at all times of day. But the net effect of that for marketers is, marketers speak to customers almost less than they ever have. I've no stats on that, but I know e-commerce marketers, when I ask, only about 2% have spoken to a customer in the last 6 months, which I find terrifying. So my question to you is, how do you keep in touch with your customers, and how do you manage to do that, given the huge team, the huge patch, and how does that work for you?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, it's as simple as I make time for it. I make sure that I spend time with them. So it would be odd that a week passed that I didn't speak with customers. And so that can mean being on a plane. I was in Vienna 3 weeks ago and Bratislava to meet with customers. And then the week after that, I was in Greece to speak with customers. This week I did it over video chats, but I make a priority and to meet with lots of different types of customers, because I certainly trust my team to have great relationships and to help them solve their business problems. But if I'm not talking to them personally, I need to form my own opinions, and I need to form my own opinions on what they need from us, on how we're doing to meet that need, on how our competition is doing to meet that need, and how my team is doing. Like, I need to observe them and say, okay, here's places that I need us to tighten up. I need us, or we don't have what we need internally, or our products are superior or inferior. I need to have all that as the business leader. That's my responsibility. And I can certainly look at, dashboards that tell me here's how we're doing with sales, which are an indicator. But if I'm not talking firsthand to customers, then then I shouldn't be leading this business, because I'm literally just relying on other people, and there's no, like, there are a lot of people that could do that. The reason they want me leading this business is because I'm a unique individual that has unique strengths. I'm not saying it's better or worse than anybody else's. They could replace me with hundreds and thousands of people, and they would do it differently than me, though, and probably do a bang up job. But that's, to me, like, I am bullish on this. Like, I have to have firsthand knowledge so I can form strategies and opinions.
I love how much commitment you have to talking to your customers. To me, I think it's the only way you can do your job hearing firsthand. But one of the things I often hear is people say, "Oh, yeah, but you can't really make decisions from just talking to people because it's not done at scale." I mean, how do you know you're not just influenced by one person's strong opinion? What would you say to that?
I would say you're talking to too few customers. So I certainly don't make opinions solely on those conversations. I look at I'm a data geek at heart. I love data. I always enjoyed maths. I love, it's not really my role anymore, but on the rare occasion I get sent a tricks or a spreadsheet, I love to spend my time digging through it. It's so interesting to me. But I would say if you're relying on one or two pieces of input from customers, you're talking to too few customers. Like I said, and we certainly think about our business in terms of quarters. In any given quarter, I'd say around 18 to 20 customers. And within that, there can be more than one person in the room. And so certainly I would say individuals, I'm probably talking to 30 individuals who have opinions on us, on our business, on my team, on our competition, on marketing in general. So if you're relying and you're over indexing, so if you think about that, I'm talking to at least 100 customers a year. I get a good span, right? I'll hear opposite inputs. Some people tell me your team's great at this or your products are great at this. And the people are like, you're the worst at this. So I'm speaking to enough that I can get to somewhere in the middle where the truth probably lies.
I'm going to look straight down the line and talk to the listeners here for a moment. How many of you are talking to 100 customers a year? Be honest. If you're talking to 100 customers a year, send me an email. You'll be on a podcast fairly soon because I want to hear from you. I absolutely want to hear from you. That's phenomenal. And as a leader in the business, how do you instill that sort of passion for talking to your customers? Because I've worked in enough agencies and enough places around to know that some people just view the customer as a bit of an annoyance. Oh, that customer's just asking for that stuff again. They're pestering us. And, how do you instill that into your teams that they have to, take that act to upline the right feedback, work on building those relationships? How do you instill that with them?
So firstly, I hire people that want to talk to customers. So I'm very clear in our job descriptions. I'm very clear with our recruiting team, and I'm very clear with people on my team who interview I am only looking for people who want to meet with customers and solve customer problems. That's who I'm looking for. So it's pretty clear right away if people aren't a good fit for that, but we really try and screen. So it's rare that I find myself that I have to convince them, but I will say it's interesting. One thing that we do is talk to everybody about what is their purpose in what we do. So, it's a sales team. So you have some people who are going to be kind of motivated by winning. Like we have salespeople a lot of them tend to be highly competitive. So they're going to be motivated by winning. You have some people, and winning to me means like there's no win if both sides don't win. Like it doesn't work. Because if only we win, if only, my team wins, then that's not a long-term partnership. And that's not what I'm looking for. That is not sustainable revenue. Some people are motivated by their incentive, like how much money they're going to take home. And so I have to make it very clear to them of like, okay, so then that the way to do that is you have to find a solution that makes the customer shine. That's the answer to that. Mm-hmm. Some people, me personally, I really love problem solving. So I want to get in, we work across all verticals. We work across every industry you can imagine. I love going in, like the diversity of speaking to a 4D printer in Czechia, followed the next week by a luxury hotel chain in Greece. I love the diversity of it. And I want to hear, help me understand the industry for my team, when they prep me, and then go in and hearing exactly what they're talking about at the customer level. So I think that's the other thing of convincing people of how to stay passionate about it is helping them find their purpose in what I set the expectation. This is what we have to get done. Now you find your purpose in that. And if you can't find a purpose in it, it's probably not the right place for you to be. So then it's about, okay, when you're meeting with customers, how is that going to help you deliver on your purpose and your values and your goals?
There's a big difference, isn't there, between someone who shows up and has that purpose fire burning in them And like I said, it's not necessarily a lofty higher purpose necessarily. It could just be, and I'm not criticizing people who are motivated by money. Some people aren't. It works. But when you see people bring whatever lights their fire, and you see them bring that to work, you can tell it, can't you? When I consult, you can walk in, you're like, yes, they've got that fire inside them. You can just see it, can't you? They just behave differently.
That's it. And you can coach to it differently then, right? Like the way I need to know that about everybody that I'm interacting with regularly, right? So what is your purpose here? Like, what are you hoping to get out of this, and where do you want to go? And then, some people, it is going to be like, I want to make a lot of money. Like, my family's at a position right now where we're trying to save money because it's 5 years from now, I want to go start my own company. Great. Then I know that every conversation we have, I need to say, okay, so if you do X, this is the result towards that goal and that purpose. Whereas other people are, more like me, and they're like, man, I really love, like, I believe in what I do, or I wouldn't do what I do. So I believe that, my team focuses on small and medium businesses, which, Google's definition of that is still quite large. But I believe that through that we are building economies, we're creating jobs, that we are making businesses. Like, I talk to businesses every day who are like, we get to expand because of our investment with your company, or we have an impact on economies. So for me, if I were coaching somebody like me, that's a totally different conversation, right? So I think, to me, that's the other reason to know it, is I can coach people, whether it's towards achieving our goals, whether it's towards, I need you to meet with more customers, and here's why. Whatever your purpose is, then I can coach you in a way that will speak to you, not to me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So it's great leadership. Which you don't need me to tell you, but it sounds like a great place to work, given that so many leaders often impose their style on everybody, as opposed to, well, I mean, you might argue they're not leaders, managers, perhaps, who knows? But you impose their style and their way of working across the whole team, whereas it sounds like you flex to get the best out of the people you're working with.
Yeah, that's a learned behavior. I've worked I'm American. I spent, the first however many years of my career, my gosh, I guess it would be 16-ish years of my career in the US. I've spent the last 12 out of the US. I worked in APAC. I was based in Singapore in a regional role. So I was all over the entire region. I've worked in EMEA at our EMEA headquarters for the last 8 years. I started here with the UK team, and now I have CEE. So those are very different, doing business in India versus Japan versus Vietnam, UK, Ukraine, Greece. It's all very different. So it's a learned behavior for me of how do I adapt my leadership style and really bring out the best in individuals and integrate into different cultures. And so that was it was something I had to really pay attention to and spend a lot of time thinking about.
I don't know if I love or hate the way that larger organizations cluster places together by region. I understand from an administrative perspective why it happens, but there's, even just the region you have now, it's Europe. It's, it's like, there's a lot of difference between Greece and Ukraine, for example, and a lot of cultural sensitivities, and even, crossing borders, and it's like you say, APAC. Yeah, it's just APAC. It's like, there's a lot of miles in APAC, right? There's an awful lot of air miles there. So how do you navigate those sort of cultural differences while still having to deliver a universal experience, I suppose, from, sort of, they're expecting the Google experience. How do you then manage to tailor it into each one of those markets?
Yeah, I had this colleague in APAC. He had the best opening slide that he would use in presentations a lot of times when he was trying to internally get people to understand the market. And I say the market, but the region. And he would have the title of his presentation was, APAC is not a country, discuss. And I always loved it. I was like, it's so perfect.
Yeah.
So I think every business has to have operation efficiencies that come from scale. So actually the clustering doesn't bother me in certain respects. If I'm thinking about resources, there's certainly certain markets I would give more resources to based on their ability to, win share, whatever, their headroom, and lots of different factors depending on what the business goal is. So I don't mind the clustering from a resource perspective. How are we going to go do coverage? How are we going to do support teams, technology teams, all of those things? When it comes to people and when it comes to the culture, that's where I think you do have to get more nuanced. So this is something that for me personally, I spend a lot of time like in APAC. Like I said, I was in a regional role. So it literally could be, I could be talking in the same week, I could be in meetings in India and Japan where the cultures could not be more different. So I would spend a lot of time asking, like, I try to be very curious and I try to be very clear that I need help. I need guidance. So I would say like in Japan, it's, my personal experience there was, it was very easy to offend somebody unintentionally because there are very specific customs. So in Japan, I would never go to a meeting without a Japanese colleague. Mm-hmm. So I was like, if I do offend somebody, I want to know right away so I can apologize. And please do your best to stop me from offending anybody. Yeah. Whereas in India, it was a lot more familiar to me because it was a lot more similar to the US. It's a very direct style of business. It goes very fast. You make decisions in the room. It was something just a lot more what I was used to. And so I would ask, but I always spend a lot of time asking, like, tell me about how, like, literally everything. How do we greet each other when we go in the room? How am I supposed to greet people? Like, tell me something, that I might not be aware of. And I don't expect anybody to know the American customs. So I would say, here's how I would, like, how do I address people? In the US, you would say something like this. And they'd say, no, don't do that. And then, so that was kind of external and then internal, but that was internal too. Mm-hmm. But then internal, I had to think a lot about how do I coach people? It's very different speaking to somebody who has been, brought up through a more hierarchical culture than it is somebody who's brought up through a very flat or collaborative culture that looks quite different. So a couple of things I personally go back and anchor on is, number one, I do my homework and I make sure I do my best to understand a culture. But I also go back and I have some little tips that I've kind of picked up through the years of little things like I ask somebody to take me through their CV when we first meet, when it's someone on my team, because then how they tell me the story of their career tells me a lot about them. Do they talk about do they talk about we? Do they talk about I worked for this person? Like, it tells me the story.
Fascinating.
And then I also spend a lot of time talking to them about, tell me about your strengths. I'm a big believer in that, so that I can coach people to their strengths and their ambitions. So I don't ever expect anybody. My job is to set the expectations and set the strategy. And then I have to leave everybody to their way of doing it, relying on their strengths and helping them use those so that they can achieve their ambitions. So I will spend a lot of time saying, here's where we have to get to. I need you to, like, you're going to lead this part of it. Tell me how you're going to do that. Tell me what you're going to do. So I have to feel comfortable with it. And then I can't tell them my way of doing it. It's not going to work for them. They're a different person.
It sounds to me like you love the people side of your job, but managing the people, meeting clients, meeting customers and interacting with them and going for a bubble tea with them and everything else in between. And you started off at the beginning talking about kind of the opportunities from AI as well, which some people would say is actually going to make it more difficult for to make human connections and to do these things. Do you see that as a challenge, as a tension, or do you see AI as something that's actually going to help you do that?
So I heard this description the other day and I thought it was the best description of AI that I've heard yet. And it's, AI should be your collaborator. And that's how I view it. So I think the thing that people, one watch out for me with AI that marketers aren't thinking about, but I'd say anybody, is the ability to scale something incorrectly with AI. So we all talk about the speed and the scale of AI. And I'm like, so that just means if you get it right, it's going to scale and it's going to be amazing. If you get that messaging and that, that targeting, for, lack of a better term and a kind of outdated term, but if you get that wrong, you're going to scale and waste a lot of money really quickly. Mm-hmm. So I believe that I've heard it called a lot of things, amplifier. I've heard it called a BFF, best friend forever. I've heard all these things. I think collaborator to me is the best. So I think discovery of what companies are trying to do and how they're going to pivot and how they want to be unique and differentiated, to me, that is going to be the place that I don't think it can replace at all. And so this is what I'm working on my skills for, and what I'm constantly encouraging my team to is like, how do you it's so cliched at this point, but it's so true. How do you feed it better inputs? Mm-hmm.
And
it's
you
the
mentioned
same.
You mentioned the word trust earlier on, and I think listening to the way you talk about AI and how people are going to use it, I think that bit of you have to have trust in not just the AI but the people using it and what they're trying to do it for, don't you? And if people can use it as that collaborator, but be open about it and how it's used and use it from the right places, that can build trust and then help you get to where you're going quicker. So it's a combination of people and technology, isn't it? It's not just one or the other. It's not a binary choice between the two.
No, 100%. I think it's like anything, like any evolution we've seen. I think we're going to have things that AI does perform better than humans, and I think there's a lot of things that it will never perform better than humans, and I genuinely believe that.
Yeah. And AI is now, without getting too techie and too geeky, is, I believe, rolled out into almost all Google products these days, is it? Are you finding your customers are loving that when you talk to them? Are they sort of, oh, this is fantastic, it's helping us get to there? Or is it like anything new, there's that little uncomfortable bedding in phase, but some people are getting it already?
Yeah, so it's certainly rolled out in all of our ads products and has been for a long time. And I think the performance that marketers are seeing with it, they like. I think like anything, there's a lot of questions, and I think the bigger questions that most of the people I'm talking to, and I spend my time talking to C-levels, and so their questions are, how is this going to change my organization? Like, how should I be thinking about the structure of my organization, the skills of my organization? The incentivizing and recognizing where AI should and could be used. And again, where we're ready and where we're not ready. So these are some of the things like I think, and then if you want to get to the people, like the kind of emotional side of it, I think I hear a lot of hesitation, kind of the unspoken thing is, can I do it? Can I be the leader that can lead through this? And I think that's the part that I really think it's the unspoken part. A lot of people are questioning of like, do I have the skills to lead through this revolution and evolution? Because it is a massive change.
What I love about where the AI discussion is going at the minute is it started off all about the tech and all about the wonderful things it can do. And we're probably still only scratching the surface of all the wonderful things that AI can do. But quite quickly, the discussion has come back around to the people side of it as well. How is it going to impact not just people in their jobs, but like you say, that from a leadership perspective? And what's the organization of the future look like? And I know people have always been looking at the organization of the future, but I think there's just that discourse has changed a little bit now. It's not just tech geekiness. It's about, okay, how do we actually use this in the wild? And how do we use this to help impact what we're doing? Back to the people all the time, isn't it? I think I know I keep feeding. I feel like I'm asking you questions just so I can get you to agree with me. But yeah, it's all about people, isn't it?
Well, but I do think the good leaders. I mean, I talk to a lot of different leaders that have different strengths and different focus areas, and some of them are really focused more with it's almost like with a CFO mindset or a CFO/CTO mindset, where they're thinking about the efficiencies, and that's their major focus. I talk to a whole lot of CEOs also that kind of maybe have a little bit of a chief people officer mindset too, which is, okay, so what does this mean, and how do we create new opportunities for our people through this as well? So I think the great ones are, I think the great leaders are thinking about both sides of that. So I do see, it gives me heart that a lot of people are thinking about how do we bring our people along and not just think. I think the fear that a lot of people have that aren't at the C-level is that their CEOs are only thinking about the efficiencies. And actually, that's not my experience. Like I said, my team works with roughly 2,500 customers. I certainly don't speak to all of them, but I speak to, like I said, 100 of them a year, probably maybe a little bit more. And I think normally the average of what I'm seeing is that most of them are thinking both sides of it. How do I use AI to create new opportunities for my company and my people? And that gives me a lot of heart.
Excellent. And do you find, probably my last question on AI, when you're talking at leadership level, my exposure to this is all marketing, that sort of area of the business, commercial side. Are you finding there's conversations going on across all departments, from whether it's fulfillment, whether it's finance, HR, that type of thing? Is it happening everywhere across organizations now?
In some. So I think this is a question I ask a lot of people now, or maybe a lot of people will ask my advice on, AI and, how they think about it in their organization. And I think the number one piece of advice I give at this moment in time, and it'll probably change 6 months from now, but the number one piece of advice I give is figure out who owns AI in your company and then make sure everybody knows. So I see different ways. Like there's two kind of key ways I've seen it is one is top down. People have a chief AI officer or the chief technology officer, it's their responsibility, or there's somebody who's passionate about AI that they're like, that's the person. The other way I see it is that people say everybody owns this and your job, no matter where you're at, distribution, HR, whatever it is, right? Payroll, everybody owns this. And anybody who can create efficiencies for our company, create efficiencies that improve our impact as well, we will incentivize you for bringing that to us. So it's an interesting one. I was reading about one of the global pharma, major pharmas, that's their tactic. And it was fascinating to me. They were like, we'll identify it. So they set up systems so that they could identify it. People could put their ideas forward and they would reward it. And I thought that was really interesting. So right now, I think the place that I see maybe the ones that I think are a little lost who don't have that system in place. But I think that's got to be a system. The first thing I'd encourage people to do is who owns it? And then what does that mean? And how do you make sure everybody knows who's responsible? I personally am a fan of the somewhere in between where you have a bottoms up and then you have somebody who can weed through all of it and go, actually that, and that are the things that are going to get us to where we want to go as a company.
Yeah, fantastic. No, it does. I've seen a little bit of both, but mainly the top down bit where, people are like, we'll just leave it in the hands of these people and they can work it out. And I think that's maybe a little bit, I don't understand it and just pushing it off.
Yeah. Well, but if you think about that, Andy, the second one is harder to operationalize. How do you actually organize like the idea that you have, the number one, everybody can bring ideas forward to who has the capacity for that? And then that you're going to incentivize how much is each idea worth? Who, where are your priorities at? And so, you can't incentivize necessarily everybody. So I think the second one is just really hard to operationalize. And that's why, not really hard, but it is hard.
And the bigger the company, the harder, the more those problems multiply, don't they? That's the thing. So
exactly.
Yeah. And pharma's enormous. So it's interesting you said it was fun because when you were talking about it, I was like, well, this sounds like something that you could run out. A medium-sized company would probably work fairly well. But this is pharma where they do everything in tens of thousands of people. So it must be incredible.
I know.
Excellent. Oh.
That's why I found it so impressive because I was like, the thought when I sat down and actually considered what that would take, I was like, whoa, that's an endeavor. Yeah. That's big.
It's huge. Fantastic. But what I think we've liked as we've come back full circle is that people and technology are absolutely the future of the business, not just for you, but probably everyone's business for the next number of years, aren't they? Has it always been like that? It's always been that though, hasn't it?
Always. I mean, if you go back to like the assembly line, right? Like the invention of that, like that was technology and operations and people. It's still the exact same. Yeah. So I personally believe that is, and that's why I've stayed so, not the reason, but I was always interested in technology, but I do feel like it's fascinating to watch the impact of that and how it's significantly changed. Like that used to mean something a little bit different, but it's always come back to that. Always.
Yeah. So someone said to me, what's your favorite bit of technology ever? Thinking I was going to say the iPhone or something. I said the pencil and stairs. And that's not, but they are two things that were invented. Before we invented steps, everybody lived in single story dwellings, and before we had we needed the pencil to get to here, to get to there, to get to there, to get to there. So, but people don't see that as technology because it's just ubiquitous. It was never invented. It was.
Yeah.
So let's see. Yeah, that's my favorite bit of technology ever. What was your favorite bit of technology ever invented? I've put you on the spot now.
That's such a hard one. Because I'm a person who likes to be very active, I might say something like the trainer, or but like a true trainer, like a sport trainer. But I'm sure there's a predecessor to that. So you probably go back to the sandal, like if you go way, way, way back or something something like
the original marathon runner did it in a sandal. That's the thing. So Philippines,
exactly like that. Yeah,
wonderful. Well, listen, before we finish, I must ask you one more question, which is what book or resource would you recommend people read or listen to or explore over the next coming days and weeks?
So I generally don't read any business books. I find I don't have the attention span for it. So I do listen to a lot of podcasts. I think there's one right now I really like, and again, noting my poor attention span. There's one now, I think it's called Everyday AI podcast, but it's basically like a 15-minute podcast. It's how I heard about the pharma, that pharma white paper, which I did end up reading. But I think it gives me just enough. It's around, I don't know, 12 to 17 minutes every day. I don't listen every day, but I do listen probably 3 days a week. And it goes way outside of of marketing, which for me, most of what I read is about marketing. And so for me, that's a really interesting one. But I think just having that kind of understanding of AI's impact on the world, like you said, it's not a marketing specific conversation to me. I think anything where right now I can get a little better understanding of that, and it sparks ideas for me and helps me understand the future a little bit, because maybe that's one reason I am so comfortable with the idea of AI, is because I do spend a fair bit of time, not just thinking about my business with it, but my life with it and my kids' future with it. Yeah. So that's one I would definitely recommend. Other than that, I'm a big believer in just reading like brain candy stuff so I can take a break from what I do.
I love reading to break. To stay away from business or just fiction, or just let your head disappear off somewhere else. I'm a big fan of that. So find something that you love like that. Perfect. Brilliant. Suzanne Claassen, thank you very much for your time on the strategy sessions.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed, since our first discussion at that event, I knew that we would have some fun conversations if we could find the time.
Oh, brilliant. Well, look, I enjoyed that. I should very briefly tell, we met at an event in Greece, in Athens, which was wonderful, and really enjoyed watching your presentation about AI at the beginning, which was probably the first time I'd seen a good AI presentation. So, yes, I must ask if you can come on. So thank you for that.